Welcome to the Future of Work Live. Hosted by Mark Salisbury, author of the new book, Socrates Digital for Learning and Problem Solving. Each 25-minute episode with Mark and his guests prepares you for the upcoming new world of work.
Welcome to the Future of Work Live. I'm Mark Salisbury, your host. Today, Mark McCrindle will be my guest, and he'll discuss generations at work. So first, a little bit about Mark. He's a social researcher, demographer, and principal of the advisory firm McCrindle. He is a media commentator, trusted advisor to leading organizations, and the author of 5 books on social trends and generational change. So without any further ado, join me in welcoming Mark. Here's where I click the button. There. Welcome, Mark.
Well, thanks, Mark. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me on board.
Yes, I think it's going to be a really good show here. And so let's just get right to it and get to that, the essence of kind of what I think you want to talk about today is how is work changing for the emerging generations?
Well, in very significant ways, because their whole lives have changed. If we go back a few generations, people probably had other aspects of life that they were committed to. Maybe they were volunteering. Maybe they got social needs met through being part of a social organization, a membership of a sports club, perhaps a church or worship community, probably knew their neighbors a bit more. People were starting families in their 20s. That was how things were more a couple of generations ago. But now we've got young people disconnected from those once traditional social organizations. And so work is the one social bottleneck through which they pass on a regular basis. Work is the place they're looking to have the social needs and learning to grow. People used to do night school or maybe out of schedule classes. Now it's the workplace, and that's where they'll perhaps give. That's where they make a contribution. That's where they grow and are mentored. That's where they have those social and contribution needs met. Work is a key part of our identity as well. And for a generation that are going to live longer and work later, it's a key part where they can upskill and retrain for future careers as well. So in other words, people are placing a lot more on work. They want more than just to exchange a fair day of work for a fair day's pay. They're really looking for deeper engagement from their work opportunity.
Oh, well, that's interesting. And I think that's kind of, you've already given us some insight into this next thing that we wanted to talk about. And that are, what are the expectations they bring? So that's part of them. So, when I talk to young people, I always have kind of two minds. One is, they're just the same as I was when I was then. And so I see a lot of, commonality between me and this generation. But then there's sometimes I talk to them and I'm going, that's a completely different view of work than I had. So what do you have to say to that?
Yeah, definitely it is. Firstly, we see young people staying a shorter period of time now in a role than has been the tradition. And this is right around the world. In fact, our estimates is that a school leaver today will have 18 separate jobs in their lifetime and across 6 separate careers. Yes, they will do a lot of retraining. The Future of Jobs report tells us that 65% of children entering primary school today will end up working in jobs that don't yet even exist. And that's the speed of the change. So we've never seen as much shift and friction. Never before has work been as flexible and adaptable as we've seen over the last few years, but it's never been more vulnerable to change. And that's what young people are experiencing. And so the whole nature of work, the type of work, the emerging roles of work, the frequency of job changing, and indeed where they work in a flexible work from home environment, how they work through the technologies and in a hybrid space as well, and how they're led. It's all quite different today to what we've seen for previous generations.
Well, that is interesting. And as you know, one of my side gigs is I'm a professor. And so I interact with a lot of these young people on a daily basis. And I am really struck by that idea. I mean, there's kind of two sides to it. It's like one is, I want to go get a good job and a career, and I'm thinking about that. But you know what? I would give this a crack. I would give this a chance, right? And that's a little different than when I got out of school. Everyone was trying to niche and get that great job and then kind of look at how it just shoots you to the top of some kind of field. And yet, a lot of these young people don't see it that way at all. They see it as it's a changing landscape, and they seem to understand that.
Totally. It used to be for a while there, perhaps job for life, and then maybe we moved across different jobs, but it was certainly career for life. And now it's very varied. And so these are just jobs that they have in life. In some ways, it used to be that we were sort of climbing a ladder. Now it's more like a jungle gym. It's more like a framework, and they'll move across
Yeah.
different sectors, industries, maybe take time out, do some further study, come back in. So that has completely changed. And even the employment type has changed. It's a world of gig economy and side hustle and being able to be self-employed or a contractor. We found that only 1 in 5, Generation Z, so those in their 20s, expects to be an employee through their life. 4 in 5 expected to be an entrepreneur, either as the side thing or the main thing. And that's at a whole new level to what any prior generation has ever said.
Oh, that is fascinating. So if we were to flip sides now and go to the other side and think about ours, as the employer trying to hire these young people, how can we get the best from them?
Well, firstly, it's being clear in our employment value proposition, really putting forward what we're about as an organization. The top 5 things young people are looking for from our research is number 1, purpose and meaning in work. Now, we've always wanted meaningful work, but this generation is saying, I want purpose. I want to know the organization is headed in the right direction. The second one is values alignment. They want to know that their values resonate with that of the organization. And so that's just a key shift from what we've seen in the past. People would be happy. I mean, a job is a job. It was about job security. Yeah. It was about remuneration. Not so now. Thirdly, they're looking for a community of social interaction because, as we discussed, so many of those other social intermediaries aren't part of their world. Fourthly, they're looking to make a difference in the world around them. That's why the not-for-profit sector is so strong as an employer for this generation, because they want to have impacts, not just earn money. Of course, the money matters. We're talking about employment, but it's a part of a broader array. And fifthly, they are looking for flexibility, whether that be in a bit of flex work in terms of work from home or hours of work or being able to take time out to do other things. But we have to just be a bit more flexible than employment structures in the past have been. If we can start to offer those things, we'll not only more attract that next generation, but we're more likely to retain them. And this is important at a time when the workforce is aging, when we've got new generations coming in, when we need to meet the needs of a more diverse workforce, and understanding the expectations across the spectrum is important.
One of the things that, my generation has, and especially as we get closer to retirement, is this idea of loyalty, this idea that, we've put in years and years for this company. We've given you the best. And then now towards our the end of our career, we sometimes feel like we're cheated a little bit, that we got pushed out the door a little too quickly. And so we have this kind of reciprocal expectation that we've always had with our employer. But this generation seems to understand actually that relationship a little better than we did. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, that's right, Mark. I think they are more pragmatic about employment, and they recognize that careers come and go, that industries change, that jobs come to an end. Not too many companies have a big secretarial pool or big reception or typing operation anymore. Whole sectors, whole roles have come to an end. This generation recognizes the speed of change and that they need to adapt and respond, and that they can't expect lifelong employment, and they're not really offering that either. But on the other side, you raise an important point with the older generations, and I think employers need to recognize the value of that experience, the value of those older team members, because in a knowledge economy, people will not only live longer, and we're seeing that longevity boom around the world, but they will work later in life. They'll be able to make a contribution. And in this sort of, knowledge-based work, our skills actually grow because our experience grows, our contacts, our influence, perhaps even the ability to ride through a few cycles and economic cycles and bring that perspective, grows over time. So The older generations have great strengths and they can mentor, train, invest in the next generation so we don't lose that knowledge. The younger generations bring strength in terms of their natural technology acuity, their ability to understand their times, to connect with their generation, and to perhaps understand the trends that are part of their world. So each generation brings strengths. And if we can recognize and value that and get that diversity of generations in our team, we're going to be all the stronger for it.
And it's interesting how these two generations kind of play off of each other. One of the things that came out here just a week or two ago, there was a study, and I can't quite remember who did it, but basically it's other studies we've seen that the amount of time people spend at a particular company has now shrunk to about 4 years. And then, so some of my older people who are nearing retirement, they kind of bemoan the fact like, well, no one's going to take a chance on me because, I'm near retirement. But the kind of the little joke that I'm starting to hear from older workers is, yeah, I might be getting older, but I got more than 4 years left in me. And so I think that it is an interesting dynamic of how that makes employers just look at, what do you bring to the table, regardless of your age or what generation you belong to.
Totally. And older generations not only bring that experience and that knowledge, but they bring a stability. The reliability is very strong. They can even be a bit more flexible with hours. Many people don't want to work full time and then suddenly hit retirement. That was the old view of retirement. The new view is just to downshift, maybe to move from 5 days to 4 days, maybe 3 days, maybe have a bit more casual opportunities. And these are workers that can, if you like, be dialed up or down depending on the needs of the organization. With great reliability, and it might suit both the slowly downshifting worker as well as the employer. So I think that a range of generations will bring strength and options for employers, and each has an important role.
Okay, well, very good. And I know one of the things you've actually studied and looked at and thought about is that this idea of that there's really different kinds of leadership styles that work best with our what we call Generation Z and our Gen Alpha. So would you like to talk a little bit about what works best with these newer generations?
Yeah, well, the dominant and traditional form of leadership has been that hierarchical one. That command and control model. It's quite bureaucratic, often autocratic, with someone leading and everyone dutifully operating within a chain of command. And that highly structured form just does not resonate with, firstly, today's realities of full-timers, part-timers, casuals, contractors, hybrids, some in the room, some working from home. We need different approaches. That might have worked in a workforce where we had more people, and so we needed efficient leadership structures. Now we're all getting by with fewer team members, and we're getting through technology greater efficiency. So we need flatter structures. We need empowered teams. We need people that can develop their own leadership and operate independently or in small teams autonomously. And that requires more participative, contributive, and involving leadership style compared to that command and control and autocratic approach. So the flat structure, the engaging, the circle rather than the pyramid, those that can lead by getting the best out of that diverse team rather than shouting the orders. And, it's that collaborative leadership style where all of those voices are listened to, or where it's a little bit more two-way, and where we're respecting and empowering our team and seeing them grow and build their opportunities. It's that style that leads to better engagement, leads to better tenure, and it also leads to people more likely to be those net promoters to say, this is a great place to live. I'm proud of the company I work at. I enjoy the work culture and I respect my boss. So yeah, definitely a more dialed down leadership, less on the power and authority, more on the EQ, the emotional intelligence, and the relational engagement.
What you're talking about too is it strikes me has a lot to do with the control of individual managers and those kinds of things. I worked for a very large aerospace company in North America in the Seattle area at one time. I won't mention any names, but I was really struck by when I started work there were a number of managers. They'd been there for 40 years and never worked for another company. And so there was this thing, I mean, and a certain amount of pride at that company. Whereas someone would say, you know, we're thinking about doing this to the project, to this particular product, and someone would object and basically say, well, you know, that's going to cut the quality down, and I don't want our name on that thing. And they weren't kidding. And I was really struck by that people were that loyal and that concerned and so much a part of that. And I think if you're not at organizations for a very long time, it's hard to kind of build that. But I think you're saying something similar, that we can build kind of a version of that with our own management teams.
Yeah, totally. You know, where they feel that they've got a say over it, they've got a voice into it, they're part of it. You know, we discussed earlier how they want to work with an organization where they resonate with the values, where they feel those values are my values, where they feel they can make a contribution, where they can help shape the culture and have a place of belonging, where they can feel they're making a contribution to the team and the outcomes, and where the wins that the team has are celebrated and the impacts that they make towards that vision are rewarded. So that's a very engaged style. That's almost, we call young people today working within an organization, we call them intrapreneurs. You know, they're sort of like entrepreneurs, but they're not working on their own thing. They're working on the boss's thing, the company's thing, but they're working on it as if it was their own. And that can only happen if we see people not as cogs in the machine, but empowered individuals given responsibility, given a realm, and we say, you know what, we want you to shape this and improve. This is your department or your area, or these are your goals that we want achieved. You go out, you get it done, and there's going to be great celebrations once you achieve it. You know, that's the internal entrepreneur, the intrapreneur, and that's where young people want to be, and that brings better outcomes to the organization as well.
Oh yeah. Well, one of the things, if we're going to kind of wrap up this, because we want to spend a little bit of time talking about your book too, as well. But if we're going to kind of wrap up this, one of the takeaways, I think, how we might be able to say it is it's ineffective really to manage these new generations with the old styles. And so could you kind of help us kind of wrap our heads around that statement?
Yeah, totally. Well, you know, it does mean that the communication flow has to be both ways. It can't just be us issuing orders, but more of that collaborative discussion-based approach. It's not that the leader doesn't have authority and responsibility. Of course they do. And even if we've got that circle picture of leaders interacting with team, one of them has an L on them, you know, a capital L for leader. And that's important. We're not saying that authority or responsibility isn't there, but just the manner is probably going to feel a little bit more collaborative, probably a little bit more like we're a team working to a goal, rather than we've suddenly joined the military and we've got a sergeant major, you know, over us. And I think that firstly, modern management practices show is a more outcomes focused approach, because people are all invested in it, and people feel that it's their own solution, that they're empowered towards that. You know, when it's the hierarchical approach and the boss tells them what's to be done and how to get it done, if it falls over, it's like, well, you know what, it wasn't my gig anyway. It's send it up the line. That's the boss's problem. But if we're consulted, if we know what the clear vision is and we're given a bit of freedom towards its attainment and rewards, feedback and celebration once we get there, we're going to be far more invested. And now it's our company, it's our business, it's our outcomes. It's not just that of the boss or the brand. So it's a way to engage this generation more, and that's what they're looking for. You know, this is the sandpit in which they're operating. You know, they're not part of those volunteer groups. They're probably not building as much, you know, outside of that in a community or social sense. So work is the realm, and if we can empower them, I think that's going to make a difference. So that's not only a shift in the communication style, but it's a shift in the leadership style, and it's also a shift in our attitude of how we see our team. Diverse, and we're able to bridge gaps. There's young and there's old. There's some in the room and some perhaps hybrid. There's different cultures there, and it does require a leader to have a fair bit of that social acuity, that emotional intelligence, that ability to understand the team, to facilitate the culture, to adapt their leadership style depending on the situation, and to understand their team and bridge those gaps.
Okay, very good. Yeah, I think that puts a nice wrapper on this, and that'll let us just kind of move forward to the last and final item, but sounds pretty cool to me, is you have a book that you call Work Well-Being. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, it was based on a series of studies that we ran where we were trying to understand what is it that will attract and retain employees? How can we make work a flourishing outcome in life? We called the subtitle of the book, Work Wellbeing, is Leading Thriving Teams in Rapidly Changing Times. And keywords there, we want our teams not just to be successful, but thriving. And these times are not just changing, they're rapidly changing. And so how can we operate in that regard? How can we make work a place where it's a place of well-being, where people thrive, not just through their remuneration, but through the social and through the contribution and through their own growth, and that we've got that sense of people coming together, walking away, not only having achieved some great outcomes for the business, but having felt that they are growing and enjoying that day at work themselves. We all have to do tough days. There's times when we've all got, as it were, sharpen pencils or do something pretty tedious. That's life. That's work. But hopefully we can, in those times, see the bigger picture. We can see that we're achieving something that is meaningful and that we can feel proud of. And I think if we can articulate that as leaders, we'll create this culture of well-being. We'll create better outcomes for the employees. And we found, as we looked at organizations that had this more engaging leadership, clear communication, empowering approach to team, and really were focused on the well-being of the team overall, we found that not only were there better outcomes in terms of mental health and engagement and commitment, but they were more productive. They were more engaged in those roles, and the outcomes in terms of tenure, net promotion, and commitment to those roles was far higher as well. So it brings a return on investment, and of course, it makes the world, the community, and those employees better off as well.
I know when I put together a book or something, other significant piece of work, there's always a couple of things that jump out at me that I enjoy, but the audience may or may not like it, or other people, and it always makes me kind of smile. And I'll always go, of course, I should have thought of that. Did you have one of those moments with this book?
Yeah, I did. Probably the first. We know that to have virtue in our organizations is important, but I wasn't quite expecting the strong link between the ROI, the output, and the profitability. So that was encouraging to see. Probably the next thing was that we went into it knowing that from previous research that some of those aspects is what this next generation wants, the purpose and meaning and impact and values and flexibility. But there was hardly a difference across the age groups. Everyone wants that. There's no surprise there, regardless of age. Who doesn't? And that has been a shift, because if we go back 20 years to some of the historical research we looked at, people weren't looking for an organization that has the same values as them, or that where they can find meaning and purpose or have an impact on the world around them. A job is a job. These days, it's a lifeline to social interaction, purpose, and a place of belonging for all of us. So we've all adapted along the journey, and it'll meet the needs of all of the generations if we get there.
All right. Well, anything we didn't talk about that you'd like to add before we put a wrapper on this program?
Well, just the final thing I'll say, we talked about these different generations, millennials and Generation Z, but there's another one emerging, children of today, called Generation Alpha, born since 2010. They're only just becoming teenagers, but in a decade, they will comprise nearly 10% of the workforce as casuals, part-timers, or even moving into full-time roles. So the point is that it's ever-changing. And already we know these younger generations are more tuned in to global issues, to technology, to environmental concerns. They've got kidfluence, even though they're young, they're shaping parents' purchasing behavior, and they'll bring a new flavor again, probably ramp some of these trends up. So it never ends. To adapt, to change, and to bring in the right leadership, and to make the workplace relevant for the ever new cohort. So all power to all those leaders out there, because it's an important role, and it literally shapes the future and impacts those emerging generations.
Oh, very good. And you brought us in right on time. So that's our program. So Mark, thanks so much for being with us today. And we really appreciate it. And best of luck. And you have to come back and visit us again sometime.
I'd love that. Thanks for having me, Mark. Appreciate it.
You can find the Future of Work Live episodes in video and podcast format on www.marksalisbury.com. Additionally, YouTube hosts the video episodes on the Future of Work channel, and Apple, Spotify, and Google host the podcasts.